I hope that these activities help us think more deeply about the issues of change and continuity, and that cultures around the world actually come with different values and emphases. And so how does this relate to responsibility? A responsible person in continuity culture will want to keep the river calm so everyone can stay afloat. But a responsible person in a change culture welcomes the rapids, because these rapids can actually produce new ideas and improved ways of doing things. Let's move on to talk about projects and planning and how this relates to responsibility in different cultures. Some cultures are short-term, today-oriented, while other cultures are much more long-term, tomorrow-oriented. In general, continuity cultures are more short-term, while change cultures are more long-term. We'll discuss later why it's that way. We were discussing project matters in our multicultural team, and one colleague from Central Asia spoke up with a smile on his face, and he said, "You Westerners, all you want to do is plan, 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 write another plan." And he's right. This is very much a Western mindset, to make plans and goals and draw up weekly and even daily schedules. Organizations have strategic planning meetings, even make a 5-year strategic plan. They make proposals for 3-year plans, set annual and monthly goals, and so on. And we consider this godly wisdom. At the same time, Jesus clearly urges us, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. And the Apostle James writes about this as well in James chapter 4. Let me read that. He says, "Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that." Certainly, life in the first century, culturally speaking, was very different than our busy, planned, scheduled life now in the 21st century. Take, for example, a newcomer from India, and he's connecting with a church in Europe, and he wants to see the pastor about a personal issue. And the pastor says, let me look at my calendar. And then he says, well, what about if we meet next week on Friday at 1:30 p.m.? The newcomer smiles sweetly and leaves, wondering, how is this pastor so busy? Many pastors take their full hour lunch break, and then their full holidays, and they seem to have no time outside their contracted schedules. But then pastors from short-term cultures, they struggle with taking breaks in the first place, going on holidays, if they ever go. They work 7 days a week, always counseling people in their crises, out on calls, or maybe it's just visits, often till late at night. And their workload only builds up more and more as they respond to people's needs without proper schedules. The phone is always on. And eventually, their lives crash. And sadly, even their families crash. You know, I'm presently serving as a consultant for several ministries, and one all-Asian team, when they have their team meetings, they'll easily run for 3 hours. Another multicultural team with a Western leader, they work hard to keep the weekly meetings at an hour, at the most 1.5 hours. Now, these are examples how cultures handle time, tasks, and projects very differently. They highlight the difference between today-oriented versus tomorrow-oriented cultures, short-term in contrast to long-term cultures. And all of this relates to how cultures look at responsibility and work. The long-term, tomorrow-oriented people who love to plan and strategize can easily become a culture of documents. a newcomer family from a Central Asian country, were becoming members of a church in the West. And the very friendly pastor then sent them a 15-page document of the statement of faith and the church covenant, all in difficult English. I don't know if he ever gave them a phone call or invited them to his office or visited them in their home, went out for coffee, but he got the document to them. I call this the tick the box or fill in the blanks ministry, a documentation culture. You know, we are familiar, of course, with the many checklists in medical clinics and health services. These have their places, especially in medicine, or take the airplane pilots, for example. But it's almost as if the checklist has become a guide for relationships. Once you've ticked the boxes, or you've sent out the email, you've served the Lord and done your task. I remember a gentle member care colleague. It was his time to do the annual review with me. And I welcomed him into my office, and he came in holding a sheet of paper with a list of questions. And then he plowed through the questions, which I've now forgotten. And as I dutifully answered the questions, he was doing member care, ticking the boxes. Was he really? Individualist cultures believe in this efficiency and punctuality and planning and schedules. Anything that smacks of inefficiency or last-minute preparation is nearsighted or tardy and is considered a negative quality, and you've got to correct that. So we thrive on getting tasks done and meeting deadlines, and the project is complete. You know, it is ironic that individualist cultures that encourage creativity and personal achievement, they have allowed schedules and efficiency plans and safety guidelines to override relationships and almost choke the very spontaneity that they encourage. In some Western settings, one needs to schedule appointments months ahead. And then once it's in the calendar, nothing can change it. In some places, one even needs to schedule a phone call. Now, individualist cultures are task-oriented people. And so they ask, what work do you do? And that's my habit. When I meet a person, one of the first things I do is ask, what's your job, or what work do you do? Now, persons from communal cultures, on the other hand, won't talk about jobs so easily. Rather, they would boast about how long they stayed up last night. They drank tea and watched movies and hung out with friends. Is this something to boast about, how little you slept last night? And how many hours you hung out with your friends? Well, it depends whether you come from a today-oriented or a tomorrow-oriented culture. And many a Western colleague is frustrated when the today-oriented team member consistently procrastinates with their task. Why can't that national team member plan better and book their tickets earlier? They wait till the very end, and then the tickets are so much more expensive. Or when it's time, for example, to submit the monthly report. Always the report. And the today-oriented people will delay and procrastinate. And the administrator waits for the report, and it never gets written. Or when a team leader, for example, needs to prepare an outline or a summary for the project that they're planning to do. So does it ever get done? And what about the times someone from a today culture says they're going to show up, but then they don't come? Oh, so sorry, I had guests last night. The tomorrow-oriented person sees this as being irresponsible. And in a world of projects and activities, it is. But the person from the short-term or today-oriented culture will say, I have to take care of the immediate. That's my responsibility. However, often the immediate is simply immediate gratification, an easy way out. Now, let's take some time for this next activity, which I've called Tips for Task Cultures and for People Cultures. And I've got a list of different tasks there. Some are more tomorrow-oriented and others are more today-oriented. And we're going to do a tick the box now. and tick those that you think would be something that you could or should work on.